Hello and welcome to MCPL Readers Lounge Live, our quarterly video series where we talk about what we're reading, we talk about some fun things happening at the library, and we answer your reader questions. My name is Angie and I'm joined today by Scott and Andrew, and we're going to be talking about all of those things and more. And we are here live at our new East Independence branch, so you may get to see some library activity happening in the background. But again, the best way to get to know all of us is to find out what we've been reading. So Andrew, what have you been reading lately?
You know what? Whenever it gets to fall, I love to read some horror novels. And so there's one author, I've actually read a couple of his novels that I'd like to mention. His name is Andrew Joseph White, and the two novels I've read recently are The Spirit Bears Its Teeth and Hell Followed With Us, which is interesting because one of them is sort of a post-apocalypse and the other one is historical horror. And so it's just interesting seeing an author do two such divergent styles so effectively. But they're both very supernatural horror and fairly graphic. So if you like some adult horror, you might enjoy those.
If I like my adult horror on the less graphic side, which one of those would you recommend for me?
Ooh. I would probably recommend neither of them if you don't like them on the graphic side. In that case, I would recommend Horror Movie, which is another novel I just read that is a little lighter on the actual sort of gore, but it still hits some of those traditional horror notes.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about you, Scott? Do you have anything I might want to add to my reading list?
Yeah. So one of the ways we help to kind of build the skills of our staff, Angie and I host a genre book club for staff members over Microsoft Teams. And we did graphic novels recently, and one of our Woodneath staff read their first graphic novel and their first manga. And so I picked up the manga because it sounded very interesting. And they were correct. It is beautiful. It is called The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. And it is essentially a world where there is an inside and an outside. So the inside is kind of like a medieval castle-y kind of thing with soldiers, and the outside is just these creatures who have been cursed. And this little human girl who has been left abandoned on the outside because they think she is cursed. So there's kind of that like witch hunt kind of thing going on. But she has been taken on by this cursed monster who she calls teacher, and they have this really gentle relationship. It's very beautiful. Like manga has just the black and white illustrations, and the way that the illustrator uses these is just amazingly beautiful. Like I love the way that they use the dark of the outsiders and the light of the child, and it's just very beautiful. It does get kind of violent sometimes, although I've kind of described it as like a cozy kind of thing, because it is this very gentle relationship that's happening, but there is kind of violence surrounding the situation that seeps in sometimes. But I do think you've actually added that to your read list.
I do. I have it checked out right now. I have not gotten to it yet. But you are right, though, that those book groups, but just talking to library staff in general is where I get a good lot of my book recommendations. And in fact, the one I want to talk about first is one that I got as a suggestion from another MCPL colleague, and specifically the audiobook of The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. This book is about a legendary female pirate, and she's now retired. She's living a reclusive life with her daughter and her mother, but someone tracks her down and is going to pay her a lot of money, which will help secure her retirement and her family if she goes on one last adventure to track down this woman's missing granddaughter. And so she goes on this adventure. She tracks down her old crew, who all have very unique personalities and unique skills they bring to this adventure. And on the way, they encounter lots of things like a disreputable magical Frank, a demon, a magical island, and lots of other things on their way to find this missing granddaughter, but also a treasured artifact that might be in her possession. And so this was really fun. The audiobook is great. There's lots of humor to it. Their narration is wonderful. There's also a second narrator who gives you some kind of documents about this adventure that have happened and some of the legends surrounding it. It's really wonderful and well done. All right. Well, Andrew, do you have any other recommendations?
Another type of reading I like to do a lot is adaptations of classic literature. And so one I've read recently that's actually part of a series, I think it's called Classics Remixed, but it's called Most Ardently, which if you recognize might be one of the most famous lines from Pride and Prejudice. And as somebody who has not really enjoyed Pride and Prejudice itself.
We've had this discussion
Yes.
before, yes.
But Most Ardently, I did thoroughly enjoy, and it's sort of a queer retelling. And so it's able to take a classic and make it, in my opinion, much more relatable.
I never finished Pride and Prejudice, but I found it quite funny. But I had to talk to people about it. I was reading it with a friend, and they moved away, which is why I never finished it. But when we were talking about it, I was like, man, this is really funny, but it is hard to get into the language and the writing.
I'm about 2/3 through, but I've been about 2/3 through for a couple years now. So.
Well, I recommend you read the whole thing because Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen are one of my favorites. But I also do really enjoy a lot of retellings, and Most Ardently is on my list too as one to read as kind of a very different take on that classic. Scott, do you have any other books, any other classics, any otherwise you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I've been teasing and saying I was going to listen to some audio graphics. So graphic novels, illustrated books, essentially. A lot of them have been getting audiobooks, and I was like, how is this going to work? Often it's full casts, which makes a lot of sense because it's a lot of characters talking, right? So there are 3 kids ones that I read. The first one being Nimona, which is, I think, the one I promised because it's one of my favorite graphic novels of all time, Indy Stevenson. I love them as a writer because it just feels like anything can and will happen in their worlds. Also recommend Lumberjanes. Listen to the audiobook, which has won some audiobook awards, and it was phenomenal. I was like, oh, I love this. And so I reread it, and then I watched the movie. And the movie was not the Nimona of the graphic novel or the audiobook. Andrew, you feel differently.
I do. I really enjoyed the graphic novel and the movie, but it makes me wonder if I would enjoy the audio graphic novel as much as the other 2 versions.
You should definitely check it out. So then I listened to New Kid, which is the first graphic novel to win the Newbery. And it was amazing. The jokes all landed. It's a little like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, where the main character draws his own comic books, and the comic books worked perfectly in the narration. And then the other one was recommended by Angie, which was Stunt Boy in the Meantime by Jason Reynolds. And it's a kid kind of just living his life, but he has this alter ego, Stunt Boy, and there's a terrible bully who is the worst, which is always very funny in the narration. I love Jason Reynolds. It was a great story. I liked the way they put it together, lots of sound effects. It's has kind of a movie set feel, so you get like the director calling out and you get these sound effects when his anxiety is hitting, and so very good. I recommend checking out graphic novels that have been turned into audiobooks.
Yeah, and anytime this conversation comes up, I always recommend Good Talk by Mira Jacob as well. It is an adult one, and it's about a series of conversations the author has about race. So like you were talking about earlier, a lot of times graphic novels do have lots of dialogue because there's all the speech bubbles, and so this one works especially well as an audiobook as well. And it's always good to pair the audiobook with being able to see the pictures in front of you too. That's a great way to check them out too.
Sure.
Well, another book that I've been reading, completely different than what we've been talking about so far, is some nonfiction. I read Challenger by Adam Higginbotham, which is a nonfiction account of the Challenger disaster. What I really liked about this and Higginbotham's like telling of this story is he does a really great job of giving you the context and the background, and so you get a little bit about kind of the history of the space shuttle program and how it developed. But then he really does a wonderful job of weaving together both the kind of science and technology aspect, like the social and political context, because a lot of the reasons why the disaster happened was due to some of the political pressure that was the result, some of the cuts in NASA that led to a lot of kind of shortcuts that happened. But also the biographies and the personal stories, so you really get invested in the people who are part of this and how they were affected by the disaster. So it was really, really fascinating. He's one of the authors of like narrative nonfiction that really is like fiction, nonfiction that reads like fiction. So you really are engrossed in the story of this disaster. He's also the author of Midnight in Chernobyl, which was turned into, I think, an HBO documentary. So this is obviously kind of a topic that he does very well. So I really enjoyed that. How about you, Andrew? Anything else?
More books? I've always got more books. Another one that it's become a love to hate book is the book, we talked about it earlier, One Day by David Nichols. I read the book and I just didn't like the characters or how it ended. So I watched the movie and I also didn't like the characters or how it ended. So now I'm watching the Netflix TV show, which it's the best version that I've seen, and I kind of like the characters.
Okay. Well, what didn't you like about the characters in the other version? What makes them slightly better in this one?
I felt they were difficult. They were difficult to like. And One Day, by the way, goes from one day over the course of 20 years, two people who kind of weave in and out of each other's life, and it's generally tagged under romance. But I think that yes, technically it's romance, but I have complicated feelings about it. And I have complicated feelings about the characters, which I guess might actually make it good, because I feel things, even if I don't like the things I feel.
All right. So if you want to feel things, read One Day. We won't promise what feelings.
Read it and watch it, and then watch it.
All right.
Keep going.
Well, I felt a lot of things about my last book, Skippy Dies by Paul Murray. Starting last year, I kind of made a goal to reread one of my favorite books every month because I'm not usually a rereader. And this is a book that I read first about a decade ago. And he had a new book that came out last year, The Bee Sting, that I also really enjoyed. So I went back to Skippy Dies. This is a book that takes place at an Irish boarding school, and Skippy dies in the first couple of pages, so it's not a spoiler. He at a donut shop, very tragically, and then we go back in time to find out what led up to these events. And so there is a lot. It takes place at a boarding school. There's a lot of adolescent male posturing in this novel, which is not something I would normally enjoy, but it really shows the cost of all of that, what that adolescent male posturing is hiding, and what the effects of kind of repressing some of those things might be. It's a book that has a lot of humor in it, but it also has a lot of heart. And it also follows, in addition to Skippy and his boarding school pals, it also follows a teacher at the school who himself attended the school, so you get to see kind of what the grown-up version of those boys is like too. So I highly recommend that one. And rereading some of your favorites in general, if you are someone who, like me before, is not someone who usually rereads.
There's too many books in the world, I think, is the reason you're like, well, I could go back and read a favorite, but there's new stuff coming out all the time.
Well, Andrew does 3 different versions of the same
I will
story.
read,
So.
I will read, and I will read new versions of it and all that sort of stuff.
Submit yourself to the punishment of the same story.
It'll be better next time.
Well, no matter what kind of reader you are, we hope you found something to enjoy in our Librarian's Picks segment.
I'm Shelby, and my favorite book that I read this month was Drake the Super Excited, Overeager, In-Your-Face Snake. It's a really cute book with a lot of rhymes, and it talks a lot about how to make sure that your friends are happy with being friends with you.
My name is Gwen, and my favorite book I read this month is Green Frog by Gina Chung. It's a collection of short stories that has a beautiful blend of the fantastic and the real.
A book talk that I enjoyed for Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie N. Holmberg is about a young man who inherits a mansion. And it's a really, really ancient mansion. And what he finds out once he gets there is that it is haunted. And finding out what each room can do becomes interesting, as the walls might drip red paint, or the floor might suck him down to the basement. And then when the magical housekeeper comes in to help him tame the house, the two of them get along in fun ways. It's a great read, really fast, really fun, with a wonderful ending. And there's a book too, which is called Boy of Chaotic Making. I highly recommend it.
Mid-Continent Public Library is proud to be hosting a special virtual event with renowned tech expert Audrey Tang. Tang served as Taiwan's inaugural Minister of Digital Affairs and has been named one of Time magazine's most influential people in AI. Tang has played a crucial role in democratically employing technology in elections and health epidemic responses, and will be discussing how technology can be used to advance democracy. This virtual event will take place on Tuesday, September 24th at 1 p.m. To register, go to mymcpl.org/facingthefuture. A link to the discussion will be sent to everyone registered prior to the event.
Welcome to our next segment, Ask the Librarians, where you send in questions to us and then we answer them. If you would ever like a question answered, just talk to your local branch. They are great at answering questions, and anything that they can't figure out, they will often send to us. You can also visit our website and fill out the Contact Us form. So our first question is, I'm looking for a suggestion for the Expand Your Shelf prompt for a book centered around family. First of all, Expand Your Shelf is our reading challenge through Mid-Continent Public Library. And you can pick up a bookmark at your local branch and just read based on the different prompts that we give you to help expand your shelf. So I'm going to go to Angie first, because we went to Andrew first a bunch of times last time. So Angie, do you have a book centered on family?
I have many books centered around family. It's one of my favorite kinds of books to read. And there's some authors that do that really well. So writers like Ann Tyler, Louise Erdrich, Commonwealth by Ann Patchett, Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. But those are fairly well known. So I wanted to talk about a few of my favorites that maybe weren't on your radar. So the first one I want to talk about is The Arsonist City by Hala Alyan. This is a book about an American family. The father was originally from Lebanon and the mother from Syria, and then they have 3 American children. And they go back to Beirut, to the site of like the family ancestral home, which the patriarch is getting ready to sell. And so the entire family goes back there, and while they are there, this is kind of a good place for secrets to come out. A lot of your family stories do involve secrets that get passed down from generation to generation, or withheld from generation to generation. And that is the case with this one. And so we get to learn a lot about kind of the myth surrounding the marriage between the mother and the father and what the real story might be. But each of the kids have their own kind of things they've been hiding as well, and all that kind of comes to a crescendo in this novel. It's really beautifully written, and again, getting to see this family take place in a place I don't normally read about, in this case Lebanon, was really wonderful.
Cool. Andrew, what do you got for us?
I have 2 actually. My first one is a very traditional family type novel. Actually, it's not a novel, it's nonfiction. It's Cheaper by the Dozen, which most people are probably at least familiar with the title, because there's been a play, there's been a movie and a movie sequel and a movie remake. And I assume there's going to be another movie remake. But if you go back and read the original memoir, it's actually about, a family with 12 kids in, 1920s, 1930s America. So, it is still it's a fascinating look, one, at a time period in history, but also about a family and you don't see a lot of families of that size anymore. And I just think it's one of those books that still, even 100 years later, I mean, since when it was about, I can't remember when the book was published, but it's still an incredibly interesting book. But then I also love to read things that are sort of similar but different. I have another book about found family, and I think we've talked about it before on here, is The House in the Cerulean Sea, where it is about an orphanage that takes in, supernatural kids. And then somebody who's coming to kind of check on the house and the kids and everything like that. And so I think I just enjoy taking two things and looking at them when they're so different, but they have similar cores, similar themes of family and togetherness and what all of that means. And honestly, I really enjoyed both books, and I really enjoy sort of comparing the two and how different they are, but also how they have the same heart.
Heart is a good way to describe The House in the Cerulean Sea. And there's a sequel coming out, Somewhere Beyond the Sea. So look for that if you enjoyed the first one.
Yeah, and so my pick, I kind of went back to one of my favorites, which is The Spellman Files by Lisa Lutz. She is a New York Times bestselling author. She's been nominated for Best Novel for the Edgar Awards, which is a mystery award, like the top mystery prize for mystery writers. In this story, there's a woman, Izzy Spellman, whose family runs a private detective agency that people can hire them. She kind of grew up in this world, and she's like, this isn't for me. But she finds out that her parents have been tailing her to find out who her boyfriends are, because she does not communicate, because she does not want her parents to meet her boyfriends. She thinks that's going to ruin her relationships, and she's good enough at doing that on her own. So even more so that her parents are following her, they have put her 16-year-old sister on her tail. And so she's like, all right, I got to get my sister out of this. And then her sister ends up going missing, and they have no clue what happened to her. So a mystery gets built in within it. And so it's extremely funny. Like, it starts out with like this car chase, and you're like, what's going on? And then she gets out and she's like, Mom, Dad. And you're like, it's just so good. And it's a series. There are at least 5 of them, maybe more, but really great, funny series that focuses on a dysfunctional family, which is something we haven't quite talked about.
Yeah. Well, I have one more that you might be able to consider dysfunctional if you consider a family curse to be a dysfunction in a family. This is a young adult novel, The World Tips Over by J.D. Nelson. J.D. Nelson, she wrote I'll Give You the Sun, which was, I believe, a Prince Award winner when it came out about a decade ago. So this is her first book in about 10 years, so it's kind of a big deal. This one is about the Fall siblings. So we have Winton, Miles, and Dizzy, and they live in this kind of idyllic California town. And it's about how their lives are impacted when a newcomer, Cassidy, comes to town and kind of intersects with each of these siblings in different ways and kind of changes them in different ways. But it's also about this curse that has been passed down within this family. So we get the stories of their absent father, Theo, and mother, Bernadette. Bernadette keeps this journal of like unsent letters that really gives you a lot of like backstory of this family and is really kind of interesting to follow. What I really liked about this book is there are a lot of things in this book that I don't usually go for. It's very magical realist, which is fine. I like that. But there are things like a talking dog that, or a dog that communicates telepathically, which would ordinarily cause me to put a book down. But one of the characters describes that when he reads or watches movies, he really moves in. And I had moved into this story and to these characters. I was all in on these characters and J.D. Nelson's beautiful writing. So I was ready to go along with wherever this story took me. And thankfully it took me to an ending that I really felt wonderful about. So that was The World Tips Over by J.D. Nelson.
Lovely. All right, and so our next question is a really cool one about what makes Mid-Continent Public Library special, and that is, can you explain the different specialty services, which we often call mission enhancements among ourselves, that Mid-Continent Public Library offers, and how and where to access them? So Andrew, do you want to start us off with the Culinary Center?
Yes, actually the newest of our mission enhancements is the Culinary Center. It opened just last year at our Green Hills Library Center, which is just north of the river in North Kansas City. And as you might be able to tell from the name, it's all about food. They regularly put on presentations on cooking and prepping and recipes. And they also have commercial kitchens. So if you are looking to start a sort of kitchen business, you're able to use the commercial kitchen to sort of prep and figure things out. And they are probably our fastest growing mission enhancement because, it's popular. Who doesn't love food? They have a program on making brownies. Be like, sign me up, I'm there. So it is one that you do have to, sign up early if you want to go to one of their programs because they have a lot of them. But they do offer programs for kids and teens as well as adults. And it's just, whether you're looking for food education or like culinary skills, they offer all sorts of stuff. And so, it's our most delicious mission enhancement.
And they do offer the incubator program, which helps you to build your food business. But we also have our small business mission enhancement, Square One.
Yeah, so Square One is housed at our Colburn Road Library Center, which is in Lee Summit, and it is a place for all of your business needs, and that can be help in starting your own business. So we have lots of online resources that can help you with doing market research and other aspects of building a business plan, but we also have lots of programs on that, as well as you can book a time with one of our business specialists or business librarians, a one-on-one appointment to talk about your own needs. But it also offers services for people who are just looking to find a job too. So we also have career services where you can have someone review your resume or take a class on interviewing, other things like that. And then another place you can book an appointment is if you need some help with doing some branding or social media to get more exposure for your small business. So really it takes you from beginning to end of your business. There are lots of resources available for you at Square One. And there is you can also find out all about this on our website. There's a whole special section at the top for each of our mission enhancements.
Great. And I'm going to talk about Midwest Genealogy Center, which is here in Independence. We are at our East Independence branch right now. But Midwest Genealogy Center is one of the largest public genealogy centers in the U.S. It's our only library that's open late every day of the week. So it is open 7 days a week until 8, although it opens a little later on Sundays. People from all across the country come here because it has such a rich collection of genealogy resources, but also the librarians there are fantastic and can answer all of your questions. They've been doing a lot more kids programs. I have a lot of experience in youth, and that's a lot of what my career has been. So they've invited me to, they had a big family fun day to kick off summer, and they did Midwest Genealogy Town, so they had little, like a dress shop and a blacksmith and all of these fun little things. So they also have a lot of programs for kids and teens and great librarians to talk about those things. But people come from all over and they can get a research card so they can get some items while they are here for a limited time. And then one of my favorite parts, I love physical media. I own vinyl and VHS and Blu-rays, VHS to Blu-ray is my collection. But they have the Memory Lab, which will digitize a lot of analog things. So they'll do cassette tapes, they'll do Super 8s, they'll do VHS, photographs, anything like that that you might want to digitize for your family to keep that history within your family. And so that's our Midwest Genealogy Center in Independence. And our last one is the Story Center, which Angie is also going to talk about.
Yeah, well, the Story Center is dear to me because it is housed at our Winneath Library Center, which is just west of Liberty. and that is where I began my career here at Mid-Continent Public Library. But it is housed in a kind of historic home that is on the same property as the more modern library, and it is home to all things storytelling, whether that is written storytelling if you want to write a book, or oral storytelling if you want to give a performance. And so we offer all sorts of things to help you with that, whether it is programs to help you develop those skills. And there's even a certificate for each of those, for both oral storytelling or written storytelling, so you can go through a kind of curriculum and at the end receive your certificate for that. There's also a dedicated storytelling collection inside of the Whitney Library Center, so whether you're wanting to write a romance novel or a young adult book, or if you need help with dialogue, there are all sorts of books to help meet your needs in that collection. So I highly recommend you come and browse that if you're someone who is interested in writing a book. But there's also other resources available there as well. So we talked about all of the different programs, which include everything from like self-publishing to traditional publishing. But we also have a publishing imprint of our own through Whitney Press there. So they have put out several books, including anthologies of local writing. So all of that is housed at our Story Center.
If you have more questions about our mission enhancements or anything library or book related, make sure to visit our website, mymcpl.org.
Back to school parents, teachers, and students. Get ready to ace the school year with Mid-Continent Public Library. Our 34 branches and website are your ultimate study buddy, offering vast collections to fuel your curiosity, expert staff to guide you to success, cozy study spaces to focus and thrive, and free online tutoring, writing help, and skills practice at your fingertips. Visit mymcpl.org or swing by your local branch for more information.
Okay, now welcome to Librarian's Choice, where we get to tell you about some of our favorite things going on at MCPL. And since it's fall, I think Scott wants to tell us about some very spooky things.
Spooky spookies is what I wrote in my notes.
Okay.
Andrew, say spooky spookies.
Let's get spooky spooky.
So this is just the area where we talk about our favorite resources, right? Mm-hmm. And I think something that gets lost is that the library can be a great resource for horror. We obviously think about things like Stephen King, even Dean Koontz, etc., those big name authors, right? But you can get a lot of horror movies here. We have a whole horror section. And I love this time of the year. I've already planned out my 31 days of Halloween and all the movies I'm gonna watch, and several of them that are
Is Killer Clowns from Outer Space on your list?
No, I've seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space multiple times, but you can check it out from the library. So several of those I can get from the library, but a couple things I was going to talk about is I love like kind of PG-13 horror, like horror for kids. And I made a list last year and was looking at it. I was like, man, those are great movies. I want to suggest Monster House, which is one of my favorites, but it can be a little scary for your youngers because it is a very scary house. Like when it says Monster House, this house grows legs and chases kids down the street.
But it's a fully animated movie,
it is
so
animated.
You would think
yeah,
it
so
might not be.
Don't just pick it up because it's animated, but your older, you know, second, third, fourth graders, I think, perfect for. If you want something...
How about for squeamish adults? Would
For
it be
squeamish
appropriate for
adults.
squeamish adults?
That's why this is perfect, right? For
Okay.
squeamish adults. I would recommend Paranorman to you.
Okay.
Also animated, but a much more gentle story. So Norman is a kid that can see ghosts. People don't really believe him, but he has to break a town curse. And so he uses his friends and some of the ghosts to help him break that town curse of this witch that had been tried, a little Salem witch trial kind of thing. And so that's one. I'm also going to do a deep cut for a suggestion that you can get from your library, and that is find the, I think it's 75th anniversary of Bela Lugosi's Dracula. And Universal Studios was trying to reach a Latin American audience at the time that they filmed this. So they used the same sets and kind of the same story, and at night they would film the Spanish language version of Dracula, and then Bela Lugosi's was being filmed during the day. And the Spanish version, many people, myself included, think is superior because Renfield is just off the rails. He is so much fun to watch in the Spanish language version. They give him, it's about 20 minutes longer, they give him, and it's a lot more of his story. So Renfield is the human who is helping Dracula out, and he kind of loses his mind because of it. The Dracula looks exactly like Bela Lugosi.
So it's a different cast.
It is a completely different cast. Spanish language cast. The director was English, but they have an interview with the person who plays the Harkness character. I can't remember her, Mary Harkness, beforehand, and she's like, sweetest director ever. We didn't really know what each other were saying, but he got this amazing product. It is so good, and you can find that here.
That sounds amazing. I love all things spooky, so I will definitely be having to watch that version of Dracula this year.
Also, if it's not too squeamish, it might be a good one for you as well. The Bela Lugosi one, a classic, also very good, so you can watch both at one time.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Scott.
Of course.
Okay. Angie, what do you have to tell us about today?
Yeah, well, you might guess from my t-shirt, Lit Up is what I want to talk about. This happens every fall. It is a teen writing and reading festival. So we offer lots of amazing authors, some of whom are just giving a panel, and others who are presenting workshops. So if you're interested in writing, you can explore some of that at some of these programs. But we have an amazing lineup this year. So we have Ruta Cepedas, we have Holly Black, Mindy McInnes, Jeff Zintner, Randy Rebai, Haley Newsome, and Ellen O. So I know you are in the youth world. Those are some pretty fantastic authors. Have you read any of them before?
No. Oh, no, that's not true. I've read Holly Black, and I love Holly Black, especially her Red Glove series, which I think he's too old now. If they had made a movie, Jesse Eisenberg would have been perfect. It's like a con man who has magical powers, but you're not supposed to use magic. But these are all very popular. Like, the names we got this year are amazing.
Yes, and we've had some really fantastic past authors too, like Saba Tahir was the keynote of last year. So do pay attention to that every year. But this year's one is happening at our Whitney Library Center on September 21st. So registration is available, so if you want to go sign up. We also, to correspond with the Lit Up Festival, we do a writing contest for high school students that happens every year in the spring, so look out for that on our website as well if you're watching this at a later date.
Well, awesome. Well, those both sound like fantastic things going on. The thing I wanted to talk about is Family History Month, because October is National Family History Month. And as you might remember, Scott talked about the Midwest Genealogy Center earlier, but I used to work at the Midwest Genealogy Center, so family history is something that is near and dear to my heart. And specifically during October, they're offering more classes on getting started, learning about the different types of family history, depending on where your family came from and what kind of, there's so many different segments of research depending on your own individual story. But the thing I love to tell people about most is one of the most popular things on the website is the family history forms, where they have all the forms that you can fill out online, or you can print just the basic like genealogy forms where you can fill in the names, dates, and all of that sort of stuff, including a few coloring sheets depending on the age of kids. You could print those out. There's two different levels, of course, depending on whether your kids are mostly going to be coloring, or if they're actually able to write, some of the details about it. But we have so many online resources that you can access. And of course, the genealogy staff are always there to help. You can make appointments if you need very specific help, if you've run into a brick wall. I still remember one time I was just walking through the shelves and I saw a name that sounded like one of the names in my family history, and I picked it up, and it was a variant spelling, but I found My People, and that one book took me back to like 1636, on this one line that had been a brick wall, except for one book at the Midwest Genealogy Center that broke the brick wall for me. So yeah, I can talk about genealogy all day long. But October is Family History Month, so there's a special focus on it in that month, and I highly recommend, if you haven't started, at least go and look at some of like the basic research, because once you get started and you realize how much fun it can be, you're gonna be hooked. So yeah, that's some of the stuff going on at Mid-Continent Public Library this fall, and thank you for joining us here at Readers Lounge Live, and we'll catch you later.